Hey everyone, welcome back to Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and today I am bringing you a story that when I'm done, I can assure you this will be one of the most bizarre and sickening stories you have ever heard. It's also for sure a story that is closer to home than any story I have ever told, I believe. It happened right here in Denham Springs, Louisiana, and it centers around a guy by the name of Ricky Foster. Now, before we get into this one, I do have to say some legalese. In this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. So everything I'm about to tell you about are allegations alleged against Ricky Foster that are public and put out there. You can find that. We'll discuss some ways you can do that. But as I said, these are all allegations at this point. But we'll get into it, and we're going to talk about Ricky Foster, who on April 1st of this year was arrested on 10 counts of third-degree rape, 10 counts of extortion, and 4 counts of sexual battery. Now, all of this stemmed from an initial investigation, if you will, that was launched by a guy named Jeremy Greene. Jeremy Greene is a multi-millionaire CEO. He actually owns a company called ECCO, along with other companies that we'll get into. Ricky Foster, attempted to hustle him into a deal to gain equity into ECCO. This pissed Jeremy Greene off. Jeremy Greene then decided, I'm going to expose this guy for the liar that he is. And I'm not only going to do it personally, but I'm going to put it out there for the world to see. He launches a documentary, put out on YouTube initially, called The Devil Wears Dunks. Now, this documentary, it garnered millions and millions of views that eventually led to the arrest of Foster and others, which we're going to get into. I'm going to cover it all. I'm going to give you the complete story as it stands today and go in depth regarding my personal experience with Ricky Foster. And this story really starts with Jeremy Greene. As I told you, he is currently the CEO of ECCO. ECCO is an AI application. It's an app you can download, and you can take this downloaded app and you can search for any movie on God's green earth. This completely free app, it doesn't cost you anything. It scours streaming services like Hulu, YouTube, Netflix, HBO Go, pretty much all of them anywhere, and it'll pull up whatever movie you are searching for right there through the app. Now, I can remember several years ago, I was sitting at home and I was wanting to watch Rocky 2. I was in the mood for Rocky 2, man. Great movie. I started searching it on Netflix. It wasn't there. I then went to another application I had. It might have been HBO Go or something. Wasn't there. Could not find Rocky 2. Well, an application like this, it would have took me 2 seconds to pull it up. I took about an hour and then realized I couldn't find it anywhere. I even tried like Amazon and all that. So a great idea. And this is the type of person that Jeremy Greene is. He acts on those ideas. I just basically thought, man, I wish someone would invent an application that would search this stuff. Some people had the idea. Some people follow through with the idea. He does that, and that's why he has seen the success that he's seen. Now, this application, ECCO, it's backed by people you have heard of. Shaq, Kevin Hart, Will Smith, among others. And Jeremy Greene has one heck of a story in his own right. And this all plays a part in my story that I'm going to tell you today. He was born in Maine. He grew up in the foster system, and at the young age of 15, he was actually sent to juvenile prison. However, Jeremy Greene had talent, and a lot of it in the singing realm. So after getting out of juvie, he pursues a music career. And back in the day, MySpace was like the Facebook of the day. It was what Facebook is now. He was very big on MySpace, so big, in fact, that he became the top artist on MySpace. Now, this attracted a lot of attention from the music industry, and even more notably, a guy I've done a lot of episodes on in the past, Sean Diddy Combs. Sean Combs signs Jeremy Greene to a $1 million contract with Bad Boy Records. And back in those days, that's like $2.5 million these days. But what should have been that big break for Jeremy Greene was not at all what it was cracked up to be. Why? Well, not for lack of talent, but for Diddy being, well, Diddy. The dude was a freak, even in those days. So Jeremy talked about what happened on a podcast called Simplistic, and you're not going to believe this story. Check out this clip.
No one would go anywhere alone with Puff. Called me up to his apartment one night at like 12 o'clock at night.
Wow.
I was like, hey, I want to talk to you. And I got there and he was like, let me talk to you in the bathroom. And I was like, what?
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, way.
Fuck up.
Yeah, way.
He said, let me talk to you in the bathroom.
And I was like, what? He's like, I want to show you something. I was like, what? Where's this going? And and by the way, he opened the door in like what you would imagine he'd open the, like he had like silk pajamas on.
No.
White. So
No.
Yes. Open top, fucking hair in the middle, you know what I mean?
What the fuck?
Open the door. He said, what's up? I was like, you called me. He's like, oh, come in here, let me talk to you. And I thought Cassie was here, but it was like, no one was there.
Yeah.
I come in, he's like, let me holler at you for a minute in the bathroom. And I was like, what? We go in the bathroom. I'm like, I don't know. It's a huge bathroom. So it's like, it's not like a small, enclosed, like, uncomfortable space.
Yeah.
And Puff was like, let me see you sing in the mirror. I just thought it was so weird. I was like, I looked at him, I was like, what? Well, you want me to sing in the mirror? I just thought it was like the weirdest thing, right? He's like, yeah, Playboy, like, you know, I kind of need to know you're going to sing these panties off these girls. Let me see you sing in the mirror. And I was like, I'm not doing that. You know, and then he was like, let me show you. He like turns, he looks at the mirror and starts like, I want to see like spread. He's like, let me see my face. See how I'm like into it. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And then he like tried to rub my shoulders for a second. And I like kind of slipped, like hit him with a slip. And he tried to grab me.
Wow. Trying to grope you? Trying to grope you.
Tried to grab my junk.
Oh.
And I ran out of the apartment.
So he assaulted you. That's like, boy, that's technically baseline.
I mean, he tried to grab me.
Yeah.
I ran out of the apartment. I never talked to him again. I literally went home to the hotel, packed my shit up, and left the Maine and like left New York.
Wow. Wow. And you were still under contract at that time though, right?
Yeah, I asked to get dropped.
Wow. And they did?
Yeah. I pretty much threatened him.
So yeah, he got the heck out of there. But this didn't stop Jeremy Greene from seeing massive success, not only through ECCO, but through other businesses. As a matter of fact, he has a company he owns called Samples. And Samples is located on Ventura Boulevard in the Sherman Oaks, California area, a retail location. And the primary focus of that retail location is sneaker culture. You may wonder, what is sneaker culture? Well, that's the collecting, sometimes trading, and sometimes selling of rare sneakers, especially Dunks, which are really a legendary line of sneakers introduced by Nike way back in 1985, and they are super collectible these days. And that's really where this story kicks off, with Dunks in a specialized shoe similar to what we call around here the Crawfish. Now, the Crawfish was a 2014 collaboration between Ruckus Skate Shop, which is located in Baton Rouge, and Nike. And Ruckus basically designed this shoe in collaboration with Nike that symbolized South Louisiana's unique Cajun culture. And this shoe is very collectible, and there are a lot of fakes out there. And that's one of the problems with Dunks, is a lot of people will fake those. Samples are also shoes that salespeople get. So they go around and they might be pitching a skate shop somewhere, and they might have 4 samples of a particular shoe. Let's use the Crawfish for example, and they'll say, this is the shoe, walk around in it, try it out. And they're trying to sell these shoes to certain skate shops. And these samples are very rare. There's only so many of these that go around. Well, they're faked all the time. So I'm trying to paint a picture here of what the shoe culture is. because when this documentary was released, a lot of people didn't understand shoe culture, and so they were a little confused as to how this relationship formed between Ricky Foster and Jeremy Greene. So that's kind of a version of that. So let's get into how he got into that relationship as I understand it. The crew over at Samples, they had a video that they aired, kind of like a YouTube short, and they were close to purchasing what is known as blue tile Nike shoes. And a guy by the name of Ricky Foster, he reaches out to Jeremy Greene on Instagram, and he basically says, don't buy those shoes. They're fake. So they start talking, Jeremy Greene and Ricky Foster, back and forth. And Ricky knew a lot about Nike shoes and Dunks and sneakers and all those sorts of things. And so he was able to kind of carry on a conversation. And he's laying it on thick during these conversations. Eventually, they set up some sort of call, and Ricky's on the phone with other people. And within 20 minutes of jumping on this call, Ricky is saying things like, hey, I'm a millionaire, which, look, that may impress the local community that you live in, but it's like saying you're breathing oxygen to someone like Jeremy Greene. Everyone around Jeremy Greene, for the most part, are millionaires, including himself. And just a fun fact here, but I came across a clip a few days ago where Jeremy Greene was talking to Elon Musk. And Elon Musk at the time had offered Jeremy Greene $200 million to buy ECCO, which Greene turned down flat. He felt like it was worth more, and he's probably right. So Elon is worth, what, $800 billion right now? Some people say he's going to be the first trillionaire. And the reason I bring that up is if you think you're impressing Jeremy Greene by saying you're a millionaire, you're not. He talks to people that are almost trillionaires, probably quite often. So Ricky goes on to tell Jeremy that he sold a trucking company and that he partnered with his cousin. And it was for $150 million that he got when they sold this trucking company. Now, I'm going to neglect to say a lot of the names that were said in the original Devil Wears Dunks podcast. And the reason I'm going to do that is I just don't think it's necessary to put people's names out there if they don't need to be. There's nothing illegal about that. Unfortunately, when someone like Ricky comes along and he has family and things, they become public figures, just like Ricky is now a public figure. So I'm going to try to avoid from saying names and protect the innocent, if you will, as they say on TV. But I'll move on. He goes on from there, Ricky, to say that his cousin, they bought this trucking dealership initially because his cousin built a chip for NASCAR. He went on to say that his cousin sold that chip to NASCAR for millions of dollars, and through that, boom, they partner up, they buy this trucking dealership, and then they end up selling it for $150 million, made a ton of money, and now he's just living his best life, and he's investing in all these other companies, and that's when he says, hey, I like what you're doing at ECCO, and I want to invest in it. Now, Jeremy Greene, he knows the game. That's why I gave you kind of a setup with Jeremy Greene. I told you his story before he got into ECCO, and the reason I did that was I wanted you to know this guy's not only business savvy, he's super street smart. So you're not going to pull the wool over his eyes easily. But Ricky, he was persistent. And look, I'm speaking from experience here, and I'll get into that later, but what I can tell you now is that Ricky can be convincing. And he makes this offer to Jeremy. He tells him, look, I'm willing to drop like $12 million to invest money to buy ECCO. He then upped that at another point to $15 million. Now that is serious money. And certainly, this gets Jeremy Greene's attention. So let me just break down how this works in the real world. when you're dealing with companies like ECCO or really any multi-million-dollar company. It's not like investing in your brother-in-law's lawn care business. These cats right here, they're going to do some serious due diligence. They are going to look into your background, your finances, your overall history. They're probably going to do a deep dive into your social media. Why? Because a major company is not going to partner with someone who could potentially throw shade all over that company later on in life because they didn't know something about that person. Partnering with the wrong person can literally shut your business down if you're not careful. So companies like ECCO, they're very cautious about that. Now, Ricky, one thing that he was good at was laying it on and then covering his bases when it came to pulling a hustle on someone. He would go to so many lengths, y'all, that if you are on the other side of that, you would be thinking, this guy has got to be telling me the truth, because no one would go to that length and be bullshitting you. No one. He would do things early on in this deal with ECCO, like speak to them on FaceTime while standing in front of his, quote, $20 million mansion. And then he would say, oh, check out my cars. And he would be on FaceTime and he would pan that camera and you would see exotic cars sitting everywhere. Just so many things that you would have to go to extremes to fake. So during this deal process, ECCO, they're doing everything correctly. They're checking Ricky's oil, if you will, and Ricky is producing everything you could expect that he would produce as far as paperwork if he were telling the truth. The house, the cars, everything seemed completely legit. So time comes for the rubber to meet the road. And Ricky says, look, I'm loading up the private jet and me and my girlfriend are coming with a bag full of money and we're going to get this deal closed. So the boys from ECCO, they did get the call, and his girlfriend, Melissa, she was sick. Oh, big surprise. The day he was supposed to leave. Fever and all that, he says. So he can't fly, so we're going to have to reschedule it. And the boys at ECCO, especially Jeremy Greene, they're like, WTF. I get it. Your girlfriend's sick, but you're going to let that stop you from making a $15 million deal? And that became like a huge issue. And from there, things really seem off when Ricky starts showing them the house again on FaceTime. Now, let's talk about intuition real quick. That's something we all have. Some people listen to it, some people don't. What I have found is that most of your ultra successful people almost always listen when something inside of them is telling them something is not right. And man, that intuition must have been pumping with Jeremy Greene, because he gets a genius idea. While Ricky is panning through his $20 million mansion on FaceTime, the front of it, Jeremy Greene, he screenshots it. He then takes that screenshot and he sends it to a realtor friend of his who just also happens to be Josh Altman. Now, that's the same Josh Altman who is the star of the Bravo TV show $1 Million Listing. And guess what? Guess what they find out within like hours of that? Ricky Foster's $20 million mansion, it's actually a Verbo. It's a rental, like an Airbnb. Holy smokes. It's at this point Jeremy Greene realizes he is being hustled. Now, at this point, most people, like the vast majority of people, they would be backing off of this thing. They just wouldn't answer Ricky's calls or messages. And likely they would just chalk this up to a learning experience. And honestly, that is how these hustlers like Ricky Foster get away with it so much. But not these guys and not Jeremy Greene. You mess with the wrong dude. And Ricky Foster wasted Jeremy Greene's time, and a significant portion of it. And when you're Jeremy Greene and you're worth millions and millions of dollars, you didn't only waste his time, you wasted his money. And he don't play. He was pissed. So Jeremy calls Ricky Foster himself, and he confronts Ricky on this house BS. And Ricky initially sticks to his guns, and he says, oh, I do own that house. Jeremy Greene is basically telling him, look, we have done some due diligence, and we've seen the deed, and you do not own this house. And Ricky realizes that he was caught, and he starts crying. And basically, he gets his girlfriend, Melissa, on the phone, and she springs this story about how they are under a gag order and they can't speak about why they can't tell him their names are not on a deed, but they really do own the property. There's just all this shit going on behind the scenes that they can't talk about. But Jeremy Greene knows what's up. And after some coaxing, him telling Ricky, look, you got to tell us what's going on, Ricky says, all right, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm in FBI protective custody. And the boys at ECCO are like, for what? And he says, well, I testified against a Louisiana senator in a corruption case. And of course, I'm paraphrasing here, but he brings up this corruption case and he says his ex-wife was trying to pay off these judges all over the state of Louisiana because they were going through this messy divorce. Just the most insane line of bullshit you would ever hear in your life. So look, long story short, Jeremy Greene buys none of that. And honestly, the fact that he would not come clean, that just pissed Jeremy off more. So now it's a vendetta of sorts for Jeremy. And he starts calling every single person that knew Ricky Foster. And I'm talking everybody from family to friends that he could get in touch with. They managed to get in touch with Ricky's son. Now, I didn't know Ricky's son personally, but I saw him a lot of times. My children went to the same high school that Ricky Foster's kids went to, and I would see his son. His son was on the football team, and my three kids were in the band, and I would always go to the football games, and I would see him there as he was walking through or as he was talking to Ricky Foster, and he appeared to be a very well-rounded kid. Well, Jeremy Greene calls Ricky's son, and he asked him about everything that Ricky had told him. He said, man, your dad's telling us he's in FBI custody. Just every lie under the sun that Ricky Foster had told Jeremy Greene. And his own son basically, in not so many words, said, look, my dad is pretty much full of it, and he's been full of shit his whole life. He then tells the boys from ECCO a story. He tells them his dad calls him, and he says, hey, I need your help with this trucking dealership in Florida, which there was a trucking dealership. That was one of the things Ricky, I guess, decided to tell the truth about. One did exist. There's a lot of fabrication with it, but one certainly existed. His kid goes up there to help his dad, Ricky, with this trucking dealership. He's going to do like title work, shit like that. Now, at the time, I'm not exactly sure how old he was, but I believe he was the same age as my son at that time. So maybe 20, something like that, maybe even a little bit younger. But he goes up there and he only stays a total of 2 weeks, and this is in Tampa, Florida. Why did he only stay 2 weeks? Well, he goes on to tell the boys at ECCO that while he's there, he goes bar hopping one night with his dad. One of the things you want to do with your dad, right? Now, in this home, which is now determined to be a Verbo, Ricky lived with his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter, which, according to his son, was 16 or 17 at that time. So they go bar hopping, and this guy goes up to Ricky's son inside of the bar. And he says, hey, man, what's up with your dad? Why is he in the parking lot making out with his daughter? And he went on to say that was not the first time he had heard this either. He also told about a time where he was working at a bar himself, the son, somewhere in Louisiana, I'm assuming, and people would walk up to him and basically report that his dad is making out with this underage girl. And he said, I know she was 17 at the time and not 18 because we had to sneak her into the bar. She couldn't just walk through the front door because she wasn't old enough. Now, how humiliating was that for this kid? This was happening multiple times, according to this kid. Then it gets shockingly worse. He said his dad also told him at one point that his girlfriend, Ricky's girlfriend, wanted to have sex with his son. Ricky tells his son this. He then pulls out his phone and he starts kind of like flipping through the pictures and showing his own son nude pics of his girlfriend, Melissa, allegedly. I mean, how sick is that? So at this point, this whole investigation ECCO launched just took a dramatic turn. And the boys at ECCO, they really, at this point, felt like, look, we have got to get to the bottom of this because there's some seriously criminal shit going on here. It is not just Ricky being a liar and we're wanting to expose him personally. There may be some rape going on here and some other things. So it lit a fire under Jeremy Greene so bad that he wanted to expose everything about Ricky, and he was not going to stop until he did that. So the boys at ECCO dig deeper, and they speak with a lot of friends, one of which, and when I say friends, I mean friends of Ricky's girlfriend's daughter. And one of those friends who was friends with his girlfriend's daughter, she would confirm Ricky Snapchatting, for example, back and forth with his girlfriend's daughter for hours on end every freaking day. And that's not normal, y'all, by anyone's standard. For a man in his mid to late 40s to Snapchat a 17-year-old or 16-year-old girl, even a 18-year-old or 19-year-old, I think it's not normal, but certainly a minor. Now, it's important to mention that all of these phone conversations, everything during this investigation, they're being recorded, and this is all going to be a part of a YouTube documentary called The Devil Wears Dunks. Now, more on that in a bit, but rest assured, ECCO has evidence to back up everything they're saying, and that's important. Through friends of the daughter of Ricky's girlfriend, Jeremy is also told that the daughter actually was sleeping in the same bed with her mother and Ricky. And when Jeremy hears this, he can't believe it. I mean, it's shocking, to say the least. This sounds like a bad movie, right? Now, this same friend also said Melissa, Ricky's girlfriend, had slept with someone her age, which when I say her age, 17, 18 years old, somewhere around there, a young boy that age. Now, that is her story. Obviously, I have no direct knowledge, but it sure seems like Ricky and his girlfriend have the same sick kinks going on, if nothing else. So during this time, the boys at ECCO, they do speak to Ricky several more times. Now, in one conversation, Ricky fully admits to lying. He says he just wanted to be known as the man, basically, and that he was sorry, and basically trying to manipulate these guys into feeling sorry for him. They ask him about his relationship with his girlfriend's daughter. They're like, man, we talked to all these friends of hers, and they're saying y'all got something going on. Even your own son is telling us you sleep in the bed with the girlfriend's daughter and the girlfriend, and he fully denies that, as you would expect he would do.
Jim, did you see what happened in Texas today?
Wait, before you tell me that, let me tell you what happened in New York.
It cannot be as crazy as the case I told you about yesterday in Louisiana.
You know what? We should do a podcast about it.
And with that, we did. Crime Wire Weekly covers the crime news headlines that have dominated the week.
We cover trending crimes from all over the country and even sprinkle in a few globally.
Crime Wire Weekly is available now wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Simply by searching Crime Wire Weekly or clicking the link in the description of this podcast. But these guys, they ain't backing down. And Ricky, he's feeling pressure. And you can tell it in his voice during these phone conversations. Now, all of this, y'all, is a result of Ricky Foster messing with the wrong dude. Keep that in mind. Had he not messed with Jeremy Greene and ECCO, and Jeremy Greene not being the person that he was, none of this would be public right now, in my view. Now, any psychologist is going to tell you that when a narcissist, a master manipulator, feels pressure, they are going to first try to make you feel sorry for them. And if that doesn't work, the next step is they are going to try to scare you into shutting up. Now, Ricky, he's not dumb enough. Well, he may be dumb enough, actually, but let's just say he knew that physically threatening Jeremy Greene would go absolutely nowhere, and that likely he would just end up with a good old-fashioned ass whooping. So he went to the next tactic these narcissists use, and in one of those phone conversations with the boys at ECCO, he actually tells them, quote, "I love you, dog. I just can't handle this pressure, but I love you, dog." And he hangs up the phone in an effort to make them think he was going to off himself. Now, this actually scared him a little bit because you never truly know what someone is capable of doing or what they will do when they're under that type of pressure. Truth be told, they were more concerned about Ricky taking out his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter than anything else, but they do what you should do in that situation, and that is they contact the Denham Springs police and they say, "Hey, we need a welfare check. This guy did not sound right. He hung up on us," whatever. And police go over there and they conduct a welfare check on Ricky Foster's house. Now, long story short on that one, Ricky does nothing, and it's just what I told you. These type of people do that to scare you into backing off. It was Ricky's hope, I'm sure, and I'm speculating here, but I'm sure someone that thinks like him is thinking, well, if I scare them into thinking they're pressuring me so much I'm going to kill myself, they may back off. Well, they didn't. So I got just one more crazy story that I'm going to tell you on this podcast today. And this is one that if you watch the documentary, this story was not in it. But unless you saw this person's Facebook post, you're not familiar with this particular story. And it centers around a guy by the name of Brandon Browning. Now, if you're from Livingston Parish, you are at the very least familiar with the name. Brandon was a sheriff's deputy here in Livingston Parish. I think when he left, he was a lieutenant, so high-ranking in the department. He went on to real estate for a while, made a name for himself there, working with his wife, built a heck of a real estate business, and then he went to work for parish government, and he served as the director of public relations and the deputy chief administrator. And on top of that, he even had a podcast at one point going on for several years. So I say that to say this. He's far from stupid. In my conversations with Brandon over the years, I never took him as someone who could have the wool pulled over their eyes easily or be manipulated easily. Quite the opposite, actually. So several years ago, he tells me a story about his experience with Ricky Foster. Now, I've never repeated it because I felt like it was his story to tell, and it's not really my business to put it out there. But I think it speaks to just how good at fooling people and manipulating people Ricky Foster is, and really how evil this sumbitch is. Now, shortly after the first few episodes of Devil Wears Dunks was released, Brandon started talking about it publicly. He actually put out a post on Facebook. So I'm going to read that post to you verbatim just how it was written on March 14th of this year. You're not going to believe this. So it starts, I've never told this story publicly before. Part of the reason is it sounds so far-fetched that I figured people would not believe it. The other part is that it's a bit embarrassing to admit I put myself and my family in this situation. But here goes. This is the very short version, even though it's still a long one. Several years ago, I had a podcast called The Livingston Parish Thread. One of the main purposes of it was simply highlighting things happening around the community. Around that time, a group caught my attention called the Dads of Denham. These guys would show up at Denham Springs football games, flags flying, music blasting, cooking big pots of pastelaria and jambalaya. They fed families, students, and the football team for free. It wasn't just food either. It was energy, hype music pumping, people gathering around, dads doing something positive for their town. I respected it. So I went out to one of the games, met them, had a great time, and eventually recorded a couple of podcast episodes with a few of the guys about what they were doing. Through that, I developed somewhat of a friendship with one of them, Ricky Foster. At the time, I was doing real estate full time, but I was also thinking about finishing out my law enforcement career. The real estate market had started shifting anyway, so I was already in a season figuring out if I was going to stick with it or pivot. Over time, Ricky started telling me about a business opportunity that had come his way. A family friend named Wesley had reached out to him about buying a semi-truck dealership around Tampa, Florida, and Ricky was fired up about it. He would update me on it pretty regularly. He would tell me about Wesley calling him with the opportunity. He showed me documentation of the dealership purchase, and he even showed me paperwork outlining what the ownership percentage was going to be and what he was expected to make. The numbers were big. From where I was sitting, it looked legit. It wasn't just talk. There were documents, details, and what appeared to be real movement behind it. As things progressed and he got settled in Florida, the conversation eventually shifted toward me. Ricky started saying they needed someone to come help lead the sales team and help manage the facility. He told me he respected my work ethic and that my marketing, communication, and sales experience would fit well with what they were building. Then he told me the salary. $300,000 a year, plus a $50,000 bonus just to help ease the stress of relocating and get the wife on board. Now, when someone throws a number like that at you, you don't just brush it off. You stop and you really think about it. At the time, my kids were homeschooled and my wife wasn't working outside the home. So we started thinking and praying through how something like that could work. I figured maybe I could rent a place in Florida. The family could come stay for weeks at a time. And when they weren't there, I could fly home on the weekends. My wife and I prayed about it and eventually decided it might be a risk worth taking. But I'll never forget sitting at the kitchen table with her 2 nights before I left and telling her, I don't know why, but something about this just doesn't feel right. It was just a gut feeling, one of those quiet warnings you can't really explain. Looking back, it was probably God trying to get my attention. Risk has a way of arguing with your instincts. It's like hearing a rattle in the engine of your truck just before a long drive. You know, something might be wrong, but you also convince yourself it's probably nothing because turning around means walking away from where you're trying to go. So I packed up my truck and I drove to Tampa. When I got there, Ricky told me to meet him at the house the company had purchased. It was a big 5-bedroom home, and he told me he had been the only one living there. But when I walked inside, there was a woman in the house. And I knew she wasn't his wife. Ricky pulled me aside and told me he and his wife were getting a divorce and that the woman there was his girlfriend. Later, I would learn that wasn't even true. But right away, it created a problem because I had told my wife the living situation would just be me and him. And this was the first red flag. The next morning, we went to the dealership, and on the way there, he told me something else that struck me as odd. He said they didn't want to upset the employees by bringing in an outsider, so for now, I shouldn't mention anything about the job. We would just tell people I was in town hanging out with him. It sounded strange, but I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. A couple of nights later, we went to dinner with his business partner, Wesley. During the dinner, I casually asked a question about the company health insurance. The moment I said it, Ricky immediately cut in and changed the subject. It happened so fast that it stuck with me. Later that night, we went back to the house and Ricky went to bed, but something in my gut was bothering me. So I looked up Wesley on Facebook and I sent him a message and I asked a simple question, quote, "Hey man, do you know why I'm here?" He wrote back and he said that Ricky had told him I was just visiting and that maybe someday in the future I might come to work with them. So I asked him another question, quote, "Do you know anything about me taking a job here for $300,000 and a $50,000 bonus?" He replied pretty quickly and he said, "No, there is no job here for $300,000. We're not hiring anyone right now." I remember sitting there staring at my phone thinking I had to be in some kind of Twilight Zone situation. I'd shut down my real estate business, given business away, set aside the possibility of going back into law enforcement, and driven across several states for a job that apparently didn't even exist. So I did the one thing that made sense. I packed up my truck that night and drove all the way back home from Tampa. And y'all, that is not a short drive from where we record out of and where Brandon Browning is from. You're talking about a 13-hour or so trip. He goes on to say, long story short, the whole business deal fell through. And from what I understand, it was surrendered back to the original owners. It was all fake. There was never a job. That's part one of the story. The reason I'm telling it now is because recently some things have come to light about Ricky that made me realize the situation probably wasn't nearly as random as it seemed at the time. Now that, for me, is one of the craziest stories I've ever heard. And I remember distinctly thinking when Brandon told me this story several years ago, why would he do that? Where is the motive? How could he think Brandon was not going to figure this out? Why would you even put someone through that? It made absolutely zero sense to me, as I'm sure it made zero sense to Brandon. It's evil, honestly. And the fact is, it sums up this sorry some bitch's life. Totally fake. Nothing is real. But that is all about to catch up with Ricky Foster, courtesy of the boys of ECCO, a local longtime marshal, and a Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office detective with a knack for solving cases. If you think your mind is already blown, wait until you hear next week's episode. It gets way worse and way more bizarre. Can't wait to bring you that. Couple of announcements before I get out of here today. Shout out to the states of Louisiana, Texas, and New York. You're my top 3 listening states this past month. Also, thank you. We have eclipsed 1 million downloads in just the past 6 months on Exposed. And folks, we only release this podcast in audio form. So thank you for that. Thank you to all my Patreon supporters. Could not do this. Absolutely could not do it without the support of each and every one of you. And I love you so much for supporting everything we do. And until next time, for Exposed Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.